This is the FBI. We have a warrant. You need to come to the front door with your hands up.
British boxing champion Anthony Joshua is recovering after being involved in a deadly car crash in Nigeria. Local authorities say Joshua sustained minor bruising in Monday's crash. The crash comes just days after Joshua won a big match against Jake Paul.
Grimacing in pain, Anthony Joshua is pulled from the wreckage of a crumpled SUV, having narrowly escaped death.
Jake Paul just got arrested by the FBI. And this isn't some publicity stunt or minor legal hiccup we're talking about here. His name is now directly connected to a deadly car crash that nearly killed Anthony Joshua, and the entire boxing world is having a complete meltdown trying to figure out what the hell is actually happening. Because when you look at the timeline of events, when you see how everything unfolded, this stops looking like random bad luck and starts feeling like something way more sinister. We're talking about a crash that happened just days after Joshua absolutely destroyed Jake Paul in the ring. The kind of beatdown that doesn't just end fights, it ends careers and reputations. And now two people from Joshua's inner circle are dead. Joshua himself barely survived, and Jake Paul is sitting in federal custody while investigators tear apart every detail of what went down that night in Nigeria.
Former world heavyweight champion visibly in pain as he is helped from the wreckage after this horror crash that killed two people. Anthony Joshua was injured and taken to hospital.
Here's where this gets absolutely wild, and why the FBI stepped in so fast. When a global superstar miraculously walks away from a horrific crash while his closest allies die in the same vehicle, that's not just tragic, it's suspicious. These weren't random people who got caught up in Joshua's world. We're talking about trusted members of his team, people who'd been with him for years, people who knew his business inside and out. And the timing is what's making everyone's skin crawl. Because think about it, Jake Paul just suffered the most humiliating defeat of his career, lost millions in potential future earnings, and saw his entire promotional empire take a massive hit. Then suddenly, the man who handed him that beating is involved in a crash that kills his inner circle but leaves him alive. When federal investigators see a pattern like that, when they see financial motives colliding with tragic outcomes, they don't treat it as coincidence. They treat it as a case.
Was travelling in, hit a stationary truck on a busy highway in Nigeria. The British boxer is on holiday in Africa following his win over American boxer Jake Paul.
What should have been a quiet victory celebration turned into absolute carnage in the span of seconds. And the details of how it happened are what caught the FBI's attention immediately. Picture this scene. Joshua and his team are riding high after that dominant performance, posting on social media, laughing, completely relaxed because they just secured one of the biggest wins in recent boxing history. They're in a high-end luxury SUV, the kind that comes loaded with every safety feature money can buy, driving on roads they know like the back of their hands. This isn't some unfamiliar territory or dangerous mountain pass. This is routine travel for people who have made this trip dozens of times. Then in one instant, everything explodes into chaos. Bodies scattered across the asphalt, sirens screaming through the Nigerian night, and Joshua somehow walking away with minor injuries while two of his most trusted allies are pronounced dead at the scene. The vehicle was totaled, completely destroyed, yet the one person who had the most to lose if something happened to Joshua's career, the one person who'd just been publicly humiliated by Joshua days earlier, that person's name keeps coming up in the investigation.
Photos that have emerged online that show him sitting behind the driver's seat with his top off, surrounded with glass, broken glass.
But here's the kicker that sent the internet into complete overdrive and got federal investigators involved. In the middle of all this tragedy, while families are grieving and the boxing world is trying to process what happened, Jake Paul allegedly made a comment that changed everything. He supposedly joked that Joshua didn't follow the script. Let that sink in for a second. While people are dead, while Joshua is dealing with the trauma of surviving a crash that killed his friends, Jake Paul is out here talking about scripts. Now some people tried to brush this off as typical boxing trash talk, the kind of stupid comments fighters make when they're hurt and lashing out. But investigators heard something completely different. They heard what sounded like someone revealing information they weren't supposed to reveal. Because here's the thing about that phrase, didn't follow the script. That's not normal boxing promotion language. That's not how fighters usually talk about losses. That sounds like someone who expected a different outcome and got frustrated when reality didn't match their expectations.
The crash happened on December 29, 2025, on the Lagos-Ibadan motorway near Makun in Ogun State, a stretch of road known for deadly accidents.
It'd be crazy if all of the fighters who fight Jake Paul end up befalling some sort of terrible tragedy.
And that's when this story mutated from a tragic accident into a full-scale federal investigation, because suddenly everyone's asking the same question. What script? What was supposed to happen that didn't happen? The FBI doesn't arrest people based on internet rumors or wild conspiracy theories. They arrest people when they have evidence, when they have communications, when they have financial records that tell a story. And right now, that story apparently leads straight to Jake Paul. Think about the resources that went into this investigation. Federal agents don't just decide to look into a car crash in Nigeria unless they have reason to believe American citizens were involved in something criminal. They have to have evidence of interstate commerce, of international communications, of money changing hands across borders, which means they've seen something, communications or financial transactions or travel records, that convinced them this crash wasn't just a tragic accident.
As news broke, shock rippled through Joshua's hometown community in Nigeria. Adamamala Joshua, the uncle of Anthony Joshua's father, said the news came as a great shock.
Definitely, it was a shock for us. So he has been coming. At least he comes not less than 3-4 times in a year. So that was not the first time of his coming home. So he comes regularly. I applies that road regularly. So they are very conversant with that road. So it was a great shock.
Here's what makes this situation absolutely insane, and why Jake Paul's arrest is sending shockwaves through the entire combat sports world. The fight between Jake Paul and Joshua wasn't just about two guys throwing punches. We're talking about a massive financial ecosystem built around that event. Tens of millions of dollars in guaranteed purses, performance bonuses, pay-per-view revenue shares, endorsement deals, future fight options, and betting exposure that shifted the instant Joshua landed that final combination. When Jake Paul lost, it wasn't just his pride that took a hit. His entire business model, his promotional company, his future earning potential, everything took a massive financial beating. Sponsors started reassessing their relationships, networks began questioning future broadcast deals, and investors who'd pumped millions into the Jake Paul brand suddenly found themselves holding assets that were worth significantly less than they were the day before the fight. That kind of financial pressure, that level of loss, it creates motives that investigators take very seriously.
It's that of great love for this man, because he's a man of the people. He's very close to the grassroots. It's not the type that goes about with security guard when he comes around. All the people are very close to him, and he too is very free among the people. So it makes.
But wait, it gets worse, because the financial fallout from that fight created a domino effect that went way beyond just Jake Paul's bank account. His promotional company had guaranteed certain revenue projections to investors, projections that were based on him maintaining his undefeated status and continuing to build his brand. When Joshua destroyed him in the ring, those projections became worthless overnight. Suddenly, Jake Paul wasn't just dealing with a loss. He was dealing with potential lawsuits from investors, breach of contract claims from sponsors, and the very real possibility that his entire promotional empire could collapse. And here's where it gets really dark, because when someone's facing that level of financial ruin, when their entire livelihood is threatened, they start looking for ways to change the narrative. They start thinking about how to turn a devastating loss into something else, something that might generate sympathy or shift focus away from their failure in the ring.
Joshua was in Nigeria following his knockout victory over YouTuber turned boxer Jake Paul less than a fortnight ago, who posted online saying he's praying for those who lost their lives and for his former adversary. Joshua posted this on Instagram playing table tennis with Latif Ayodele just hours before the incident.
Now listen to this part, because this is where the FBI's investigation gets really interesting. They're not just looking at the crash itself. They're examining all the communications that happened in the weeks leading up to the fight and in the days after. Text messages, phone calls, encrypted messaging apps, financial transactions, travel records, everything. Because if someone was planning something, if this crash wasn't just a tragic accident, there would be a digital trail. And federal investigators are experts at following those trails. They're looking at who Jake Paul was talking to, who he was meeting with, what kind of financial arrangements he was making, and whether any of those arrangements might have involved ensuring that Joshua's victory celebration got cut short. The fact that they felt confident enough to make an arrest means they found something, some piece of evidence that connects Jake Paul directly to what happened in Nigeria.
The car he was travelling in collided with a stationary truck pictured here in photos taken by the authorities. After his latest victory, what should have been a moment of celebration has instead become one of tragedy.
And get this, the timing of Jake Paul's arrest is absolutely perfect from an investigative standpoint. They didn't grab him immediately after the crash. They didn't rush into anything. They waited, they watched, they gathered evidence, and they let him think he was in the clear. That's classic federal investigation strategy. They build their case quietly, they document everything, and then they strike when they have enough evidence to make charges stick. The fact that weeks passed between the crash and the arrest actually makes this more serious, not less, because it means they took the time to build a solid case. They interviewed witnesses, they analyzed communications, they followed financial trails, and they coordinated with international law enforcement to piece together exactly what happened and who was involved.
Sagamu, which is where Joshua has relatives. Of course, he fought 10 days ago in Miami, and he was heading home to Nigeria, where he was brought up, or he went to boarding school anyway, for the new year.
Here's the thing that's making everyone in the boxing world absolutely terrified right now, and why promoters have gone completely silent since Jake Paul's arrest was announced. This investigation isn't just about one crash or one fight anymore. Federal investigators are looking at patterns. They're examining whether this kind of thing has happened before, and they're asking whether other fighters who have gone up against Jake Paul might have experienced suspicious incidents afterward. Remember, the internet has been tracking what they call the Jake Paul curse for months, documenting health scares, financial collapses, and personal disasters that seem to follow his opponents. What everyone thought was just a weird coincidence or internet conspiracy theory, the FBI might be treating as evidence of a systematic pattern of retaliation against people who damage Jake Paul's brand or cost him money.
Everybody shouts, Anthony Joshua, me too, I go there. Everybody just they do picture. So many everybody no shouting, say they no loud down. So some people loud down, every say, they go see star, they no go shout.
But here's where this story takes an even darker turn, because the crash in Nigeria might not have been the end game. It might have been a warning that went too far. Think about it from a strategic standpoint. If you wanted to send a message to someone who just humiliated you publicly and cost you millions of dollars, you might start with smaller incidents. Financial pressure, sponsor problems, media controversies, things that hurt their career without being obviously connected to you. But if those subtle approaches don't work, if the person keeps succeeding and keeps making you look bad, you might escalate. You might decide that a more dramatic message is necessary. And that's the theory that has federal investigators digging deep into Jake Paul's business relationships, his security arrangements, and his connections to people who might be willing to take things to the next level for the right price.
Within hours, social media users revived a bizarre theory, one that has circulated before, now being called the Jake Paul curse.
The reality check that everyone in combat sports is facing right now is absolutely brutal. Because if the FBI can prove that Jake Paul was involved in orchestrating or financing what happened to Joshua's team, it doesn't just destroy Jake Paul's career. It exposes an entire underground ecosystem of corruption and violence in professional fighting. We're potentially talking about a world where fighters don't just compete in the ring. They eliminate competition through intimidation, financial warfare, and possibly even violence. Sponsors are already quietly distancing themselves from anyone connected to this story. Networks are reviewing their contracts, and fighters are hiring additional security because nobody knows how deep this goes or who else might be involved. The Jake Paul brand, which was built on controversy and pushing boundaries, might have finally pushed too far and dragged the entire sport into a federal investigation that could change everything.
Fighters who defeat Jake Paul later suffer serious misfortune. Joshua's crash, coming days after his victory over Paul, reignited the theory and pushed it into viral territory.
So here's where we stand right now. and why this arrest is just the beginning of something much bigger. Jake Paul is in federal custody, facing charges that could put him away for decades if prosecutors can prove he was involved in what happened to Joshua's team. The boxing world is in complete chaos, with fights being canceled, sponsors pulling out, and everyone connected to Jake Paul's organization lawyering up and preparing for the worst. Joshua, meanwhile, is dealing with survivor's guilt and the knowledge that two of his closest friends are dead, possibly because of his success in the ring. And the FBI investigation is expanding, looking at other incidents, other opponents, and other suspicious coincidences that might not be coincidences at all. This isn't just about one crash anymore. It's about whether one of the biggest names in combat sports has been running a criminal enterprise disguised as a promotional company.
Crazy if Mike Tyson almost died before the fight. He had 8 blood transfusions, lost half his blood from a bleeding ulcer in the hospital for weeks. Obviously today, it'd be crazy if Anthony Joshua was involved in a fatal car crash where two of...
The question that's keeping everyone awake at night, the question that's going to define the future of professional fighting, is simple but terrifying. How many other incidents that we dismissed as bad luck or coincidence were actually coordinated attacks? How many fighters have suffered because they had the audacity to beat Jake Paul or embarrass him publicly? And how many people in the industry knew what was happening and stayed silent because they were afraid of becoming targets themselves? The FBI's investigation into Jake Paul isn't just about seeking justice for what happened in Nigeria. It's about exposing a system of corruption and intimidation that might have been operating in plain sight for years. So here's my question for you. Drop it in the comments. Do you think Jake Paul is just the tip of the iceberg? Or is this investigation going to reveal that the entire combat sports world has been compromised by people willing to use violence to protect their investments? If this breakdown of the Jake Paul arrest helped you understand what's really at stake here, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell because this story is far from over, and the revelations that are coming are going to shock the entire sports world. I'll see you in the next one.
Gets into a car accident, 2 people die right after Jake Paul said he didn't follow the script. I'm kind of lost. What script? Was it just boxing or was there something else going on?
And speaking of shocking revelations, what just surfaced in the last 24 hours is going to make your head spin, because investigators have reportedly uncovered encrypted communications between Jake Paul's inner circle and a network of international fixers who specialize in what they call reputation management. But this isn't your typical PR crisis management we're talking about here. These are people who allegedly handle problems that can't be solved through traditional legal channels, people who operate in the gray areas between legitimate business and outright criminal activity. The kind of individuals who can make financial problems disappear, who can create accidents that look completely natural, and who can orchestrate events that shift public attention away from their clients' failures and toward their opponents' misfortunes.
A reaction there out of Jake Paul, but when he gets caught with his hands down and his chin served on a platter for that right hand right there. And look at Jake Paul's face. He knew it right away. He said, woo!
Hey guys, I'm okay.
What's absolutely mind-blowing about these communications is how casual and businesslike they are, according to sources close to the investigation. We're talking about discussions of handling the Joshua situation and ensuring proper narrative control that read like corporate memos, not criminal conspiracy planning. But that's exactly what makes this so terrifying, because it suggests this wasn't some heat-of-the-moment decision made by an angry fighter who couldn't handle losing. This was allegedly a calculated, professional operation carried out by people who have done this kind of thing before, people who know how to make problems disappear without leaving obvious fingerprints. The FBI reportedly found financial transfers to offshore accounts, coded language about travel arrangements for Joshua's team, and discussions about ensuring maximum impact with minimal exposure.
Flag alongside the Nigerian flag when Anthony Joshua fights. He's often spoken so proudly about his Nigerian heritage, and his right shoulder there's often a tattoo of the Africa flag with Nigeria map inscribed in there. So when it comes to Nigeria, Anthony Joshua is very proud of his heritage. He's often seen visiting the country.
But here's where this gets even more insane, and why the Department of Justice is apparently treating this as a potential RICO case rather than just a simple conspiracy charge. RICO, for those who don't know, is the law they use to take down organized crime families, terrorist networks, and criminal enterprises that operate across state and international lines. The fact that they're even considering RICO charges means they believe Jake Paul wasn't operating alone, that there's an entire network of people involved in systematically targeting his opponents and anyone who threatens his financial interests. We're potentially talking about a criminal organization that's been masquerading as a legitimate promotional company, using the boxing world as cover for what amounts to a protection racket.
According to police anyway, they are minor injuries and he is fine. But the family are saying that they are shocked by what's happened. And there was a brief statement, we're hoping for his speedy recovery, they say, and also the people who sadly passed away.
And the evidence that's reportedly convinced federal prosecutors to pursue these charges is absolutely damning, because it's not just about the crash in Nigeria anymore. Investigators have apparently identified at least 6 other incidents involving Jake Paul opponents or critics that show similar patterns of suspicious timing, unexplained mechanical failures, and financial irregularities. Remember when Tommy Fury's training camp had that mysterious food poisoning outbreak just weeks before their scheduled fight? Or when KSI's promotional team suddenly faced that series of cyber attacks that crippled their marketing efforts? What everyone in the industry dismissed as bad luck or coincidence, federal investigators are now treating as evidence of a coordinated campaign of intimidation and sabotage, designed to protect Jake Paul's brand and financial interests at any cost.
Adding that he was praying for Anthony Joshua, the victims, and everyone affected.
The international scope of this investigation is what's really got law enforcement agencies around the world paying attention, because this allegedly isn't just an American problem anymore. The FBI is reportedly working with Interpol, British authorities, and Nigerian law enforcement to trace financial networks that span multiple continents and involve shell companies, cryptocurrency transactions, and offshore banking arrangements that were specifically designed to hide the true source and destination of payments. We're talking about a level of sophistication that suggests serious criminal organization, not just some YouTuber who got mad about losing a fight. The kind of financial infrastructure that takes years to build and requires connections to legitimate criminal networks that operate in the shadows of international commerce. What's making this even more explosive is that several prominent figures in the combat sports world are reportedly cooperating with investigators, providing information about incidents they witnessed or suspected, but were too afraid to report publicly. The culture of silence that's existed in professional fighting for decades, where people look the other way rather than risk becoming targets themselves, is apparently starting to crack as federal investigators offer protection and immunity deals to witnesses who can provide crucial testimony. We're talking about trainers, promoters, venue operators, and even other fighters who are finally willing to go on record about the suspicious incidents they've observed over the years. Incidents that individually seemed like coincidences, but collectively paint a picture of systematic intimidation and retaliation. And here's the kicker that's got everyone in the industry absolutely terrified. Because the FBI's investigation has apparently expanded beyond just Jake Paul's organization to include other major promotional companies and management groups that might have been using similar tactics to protect their investments and eliminate competition. The entire business model of modern combat sports, where massive financial interests are tied to individual fighters' success or failure, creates incentives for exactly this kind of criminal behavior. When you've got hundreds of millions of dollars riding on a single fighter's reputation and earning potential, when sponsors and investors are demanding guaranteed returns on their investments, the temptation to ensure favorable outcomes through illegal means becomes almost irresistible.